Okay, we have a few people here, so. Some more are coming? Yeah, Carolyn and maybe Osmond and Sandy. Okay, we can start, yeah.
Bhante, I have a question about the confidence. At the end of the sutta, I said because of the Ananda's confidence, he would be experiencing celestial kingships. This confidence is not the confidence that one acquires as a stream enterer, right? Just a regular. First it was Ananda and a stream enterer at that time already, and the related question is this confidence the confidence that one gains when one becomes a stream enterer, or no, just a regular confidence? If it's a regular confidence, means whoever has the confidence in the supernormal powers of the Buddha, then one can be reborn in heaven?
First, let's see what the Pali word is used here. I think it's probably pasada, but...
Chitta pasadena.
Yeah, it's interesting that it uses citta pasadena. Yeah, so it's confidence of mind. I don't think it's specific. It's not specifically referring to the confidence of a stream enterer, but I think at this time, Ananda is probably, I would say certainly a stream enterer, because if I remember, according to a this chapter in the Vinaya Pitaka, Ananda became a stream enterer, I think his first year as a monk. And so this would be considerable time after that he becomes the attendant of the Buddha. And so Ananda would certainly have the Tathagate Avecha Pasada. He would have that unshakable, unwavering confidence. But this is not, and maybe that unshakable confidence is the basis for his confidence in the great power of the Buddha, to be able to project his voice over such an extent of the world system. But it's not exactly the same thing as that. I would say that this confidence is based on his confidence as a stream enterer. But the confidence of the stream enterer is the confidence in the enlightenment of the Buddha and the truth of the Dhamma. Whereas this is the confidence in the sense of citta pasadena. It's sort of the trusting quality of the mind which induces him to accept what the Buddha has declared about his ability to project his radiance and his voice. So its object is not directly and explicitly the Buddha's status as the enlightened one, but it's the object of the confidence is the Buddha's psychic power, spiritual powers. That's the way I would understand it. I think
Bhante, I remember one of the suttas in Anguttara Nikaya mentioned whoever has the faith in the Buddha, just the trusting mind, he will be reborn in the heaven. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that is in the Alaggadupama Sutta. It's the Sutta number 22 in the Majjhima Nikaya. It's towards the end of that sutta. It says, after it goes through the different stages of attainment, then it says, whoever has saddha matta pema matta, that's a certain amount of saddha, faith, and a certain amount of pema is like devotion, affection or devotion. Okay, it's at the very end. I don't know if you... Yeah, this print is small and I don't know how to increase it. Okay, so it says, Evang swakate bhikkhave maya dhamme. Oh, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that this could work. Okay, so it's Evang swat. So thus, in this Dhamma, which has been well proclaimed by me, elucidated, opened up, expounded, stripped of the patchwork, for whom in me there is saddha matang, that's a certain measure, a certain amount of faith, pema matang, a certain amount of devotion, sabete sagaparayana, all of those are heading for heaven. Of course, what's necessary is that amount, have that amount of faith and that amount of devotion. Yeah, so was there a question connected?
Yeah, so wisdom is not necessary to, the wisdom is just very peculiar qualities of Buddhism, but what is in common with other religions, like if I have faith in God, I will be reborn in heaven too, right? In Christian sense. So if I have faith in the Buddha, in whatever he says about his supernatural normal powers, then I will be. So I can, okay.
But there has to be like a certain degree of, I would call this purity of mind connected with that faith and devotion. Usually this doesn't come in Buddhism because we have other teachings to counteract that, but somebody has a kind of dogmatic faith in their religion and strong emotional affection for their founder or for the God, but that's connected with attitudes of bigotry, intolerance, dogmatism, then there wouldn't be that purity of mind that is conducive to heaven. So it has to go along with a certain calmness, gentleness, and I would have to say also that faith and that devotion has to bring along a constellation of other good qualities, like loving kindness, compassion, commitment to the silas, to the ethical practices. Without that, then just having a rather tenacious faith and devotion towards one's teacher is not sufficient.
Thank you. But another question is, when you mentioned Tusita heavens, it's plural. So I thought Tusita heaven is just one single place, but in your rendering, put in the bracket, it's Tusita heavens. So there are many places called Tusita?
Well, for our particular, this world here, there will be only one of each of these heavens, but it's speaking about how in this thousandfold world system, like the thousandfold world system is made up of, let's say, 1,000, I'll use the modern term, 1,000 solar systems. So our solar system has one two-sita heaven, so that is for us. But the 999 other solar systems each have their two-sita heaven. But we shouldn't be concerned with their two-sitas, only with our own two-sita.
Nick, can I ask another question about the supernormal powers of the Buddha?
Yeah.
Or because in that Abhibu,
Yeah.
in that sutta, when Abhibu gave the Dhamma talk, even the Brahma retinue and the assembly were not happy. But when he demonstrated the supernormal powers, they were convinced, right?
Yeah.
So did the Buddha say anything about the development of supernormal powers? I mean, obviously it's very useful.
Yeah.
So what's the Buddha's view about the supernormal powers, and is a practitioner supposed to develop that or no?
Sort of the general view is that those supernormal powers can be developed, of course, on the basis of the fourth jhana. And they're considered to be, I call them an adornment of an accomplished yogi or practitioner. And so if somebody is has well trained the mind, and so they want to develop these supernormal powers, and their minds are, I say that important to have the mind well grounded in the Brahma Viharas before developing the supernormal powers. Otherwise, if one acquires those supernormal powers, one could misuse them to build up one's own ego or to harm other people. But they're regarded as sort of the signs of a fully accomplished practitioner. So even though one could gain liberation without the supernormal powers, but the Buddha praises those as most highly, those practitioners who have the six abhinyas. And so the sixth, these are the Chinese shantong. So the sixth is the liberation, the knowledge of liberation. But the others are also considered desirable, not necessary. Of course, they're not necessary. One could attain the sixth abhinya without gaining the other five. But it's those who gain the supernormal powers who are esteemed in the ancient Sangha as being the most accomplished. And so, I think it's in Majjhima Nikaya, I think it's Sutta number 108. This is after the Buddha's parinibbana. The Buddha mentioned, Venerable Ananda is speaking to a Brahmin, and he mentions 10 qualities of those monks who are especially esteemed in the Sangha. And one of those qualities, or actually 5 of them, are the 5 mundane abhinyas. Let me see if I got it correct. Yes, Gopika Moggallana Sutta, 108. Yeah, so it's mentioned that there are 10. Oops. Yeah, this is okay. 10 is called Pasada, Dasa Pasadaniya Dhamma. So 10 qualities that generate pasada, confidence. And so for one in whom these qualities exist, that one is now, we now honor, respect, esteem, and venerate. And so the 10 qualities, one is observing the sila, the training rules. Second is being learned. Third is being content with whatever requisites one receives. Fourth is the 4 jhanas, possessing the 4 jhanas. Then the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th are the 5 mundane abhinyas. And then the 10th is Cheto Vimutti, Panya Vimutti, the knowledge of the liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom. So those are the 10 qualities that generate confidence. Somebody else? Have anybody else? Yeah. Okay, now it's on.
Oh, I know it's very controversial, a very controversial topic, but Bande say those musicians, they get reborn in one of the celestial heavens, but other Theravada monks also mentioned those people, those musicians will go to hell, and which I know upset many musicians or even,
yeah.
but Bande, you are the working Nikayas. Is there any sutta mention this particular point?
That mentions
Musicians
going
go
to hell?
Right.
No. And when I said that these great composers will go to, what I meant to say is that this is the heaven of the devas who delight in creation. And so what I said is that metaphorically, that seems to be the appropriate place for great musicians, the great composers, the great artists, sculptors, and so forth, because they're creative. But I don't mean that literally, that those musicians are heading for these heavens. Musicians, composers, writers, they go according to their karma. But I've heard some elder meditation masters say, even like a concert violinist, somebody I know has a daughter who's a concert violinist, and she asked a famous meditation master, my daughter is a concert violinist, do you have any idea where she will be reborn? And he said, in hell. I mean, that's not, in my opinion, not the case. Everything depends on the person's character and karma.
Bante, does the commentary mention anything about this? The commentary.
About where a musician is reborn?
Right.
No.
So where did they get the idea?
There's a sutta, it occurs in the Anguttara Nikaya. It's called the Gamani Sangyutta. There's a famous, at that time, I guess you would call him, what we call him today. He's the kind of person that arranges stage shows. There's a term for that in English. Remember anybody my age remember Ed Sullivan, who had like a variety show on Sunday evening? Steve Allen also had another variety show. Maybe those who are not below the age of 70 won't remember these people. Yeah, so this was the ancient Indian equivalent of Ed Sullivan, who organized traveling shows, and then he came to the Buddha and told him that this is what I do. You know, I get together actors and I produce shows. Where am I likely to be reborn? And then the Buddha says, please don't ask me that. And then 3 times the person asks, and 3 times the Buddha says, please don't ask me. But after the 3rd request, the Buddha has to give the answer. And so he answers and says, those who put on these shows cause people whose minds are inflamed with lust to become even more inflamed with lust. Causes those whose minds are already inflamed with hatred to become even more inflamed with hatred. Causes those whose minds are inflamed with or covered over by delusion to become even more covered over by delusion. And so since they are encouraging lust, hatred, and delusion in others, then the appropriate place for them to be reborn is in hell. And then the stage manager or show producer breaks out in tears. So what do you think of that? It seems extreme to me.
That makes sense if we interpret it as the encouragement of the lust, hatred, and delusion. So it doesn't have to be limited to musicians. So they can be good musicians and
it can,
musicians who elevated people's mind. And they are musicians who can be, of course, corrupted mind.
Probably so.
So only those, and it does not include in. It's not music is not a field that exclusively mentioned there, right? So it could be any field.
Yeah, no musicians are not mentioned at all in that passage. Okay. It's just the one who puts on these shows, maybe the actors and actresses who perform in those shows. But we don't know what those shows were like. Maybe they would have been the ancient equivalent of burlesque shows, striptease shows that encourage, unwholesome states of mind.
Pandit, do you have any idea why some Theravada monks what's their reason for give a very definite answer to the questions that were...
I think they're probably basing on that sutta. And some of these suttas, I have to say, don't seem completely convincing to me. Or at least we don't know enough about the background of that sutta and exactly what was going on at that time. But certainly things like, I'd have to say that the musicians like Bach, Handel, Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, their music is so sublime that, to my mind, it's coming not from the human world, but this is a kind of intrusion or an influx of divine beings coming from heaven into the human realm, still preserving the imprints of the music they heard in the heavenly realms and coming into the human realm, and then uplifting us with their heavenly creations. Yeah, you have to get it on. Yeah, now it's...
Okay, I just want to follow up the questions. The questions she asked. What is the definition of a creation? Is only a musician has creation, a creative ability? That's what I want to know. What is definition of a creation?
Actually, the word that's used here in Pali, nimana, has a special meaning. It's not really creation like the creative arts. But nirmana implies, in relation to these deities, we might call this magical creation, in that they're not, say somebody creates or builds a house, they take pre-existing materials and put them together to create a house. Or a musician sits down with an instrument and then figures out the score for a musical composition. But nirmana or nimana means, this is actually the Chinese hua, like in huashan, like a magical creation that just from their minds, these deities, they don't have to do any work to create the things that they create, but just they make the wish, may a palace appear in front of me, and then the palace will appear.
Oh, so they are the magicians.
Well, not quite in that. The word magician has a kind of derogatory tone to it, like somebody who's tricking and deceiving others. But this is actual creation that takes place just through the power of the mind.
I see.
Through the mental determination, objects will appear that fulfill one's wish, one's thought.
So my question is regarding to the question I asked you, that is creation, for example, somebody who are able to create, for example, technology-wise, or robot, or creation of all like relativism theory. Those things, I thought that's also creation. It's not just only musician or art or sculpture.
Yeah, of course.
The other question I want to ask is also, what is the definition of putting out the shows?
Of what?
Putting out the shows.
Putting out a show?
You're talking about the traveling shows, the sutra, the Samyutta Nikaya sutra, talking about these musicians asking about, and Buddha answers those putting out the shows. So I want to ask you the definition of putting out the shows. Are only musicians putting out the shows, or are other people also putting out the shows?
I'm just vaguely recollecting the sutta. I'm using that expression just in my vague recollection of the sutta. I don't even remember the term that's used. Let me see if I could find that sutta.
Thank you.
His name is Talaputta. Okay. Okay, so he's called the Natta Gamini. He's the head man. Natta are the dancers, so he seems to be like the head of a company of dancers. So he's heard from the lineage of teachers, but Natta may be dancers and actors. So he has heard it being said that this maybe dancer or actor, I see that he makes people laugh and enjoy themselves in the midst of an assembly with a falsification of the truth, with falsehood. So he's heard that after death, they are reborn in the company of the gods. What does the Blessed One say about this? Then the Buddha says, just keep still enough, do not ask me about this. But he asks a second time, a third time. And so when he's asked a third time, then the Buddha says, surely you did not follow my advice when I said, stop right there, do not ask me this, and so I will explain to you. So there are beings who previously were devoid of lust, who are not devoid of lust, who are still overcome by lust, bound by the bondage of lust. And then in the middle of an assembly, the actor or musician causes those things to increase to an even greater extent. Similarly, there were beings who previously were not devoid of hatred, bound by the bondage of hatred. Then the actor in the middle of the assembly causes those things related to hatred to increase to a greater extent. Previously, there were beings who previously were not devoid of delusion, bound by the bondage of delusion. The actor in the middle of the assembly causes those things that create more delusion to increase to a greater extent. So, having been himself intoxicated or infatuated and heedless, he causes others to become infatuated and heedless. And so, with the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in the hell called maybe the hell of laughter, the hell of laughter. But if he holds the view that one who does all of these things is reborn in heaven, this is his wrong view. For one of wrong view, I say that there are two destinations, either hell or the animal realm. Okay, when the Buddha said this, then the headman, or this show producer, broke out in tears. And then the Buddha says to him, didn't I tell you, stop right there, don't ask me this? Okay, so then the show producer says, I am not weeping because the Blessed One told me this, but rather because for a long time I have been cheated, deceived, and misled by my former teachers, who told me that those who make people laugh and rejoice with the falsification of the truth are reborn in the company of the gods. Then he says, it's wonderful, Bhante, how you have taught the Dhamma. Now I go for refuge to the Blessed One, the Dhamma, the Sangha. I would gain the going forth under the Blessed One, I would gain the full ordination. Then this headman named Talaputta gained the going forth in the presence of the Buddha. He gained the ordination. And then not long after he was ordained, he became an arahant. So that's the sutta.
Bhante, actually my question is, I noticed that I'm talking about modern world.
You notice that?
I want to mention is, I have a question is that nowadays, a lot of people putting out different shows, not just musicians, and they inflamed with our delusion and hatred and anger. So how do you take our Dhamma teaching, the Buddha's Dhamma teaching, to apply to modern society? That's what my root of a question.
Well, it's too big a question. I mean, I can't say where they're going to be reborn, but if they use, especially things, I say those people who use the internet for, what do they call, like people who propagate conspiracy theories on the internet and who inflame people's hatred. Like, for example, before the last election, when Hillary Clinton was running against Donald Trump, there was somebody who spread over the internet this false rumor that Hillary Clinton was operating a pedagogy ring out of a pizza shop in Washington, D.C. And then somebody who heard that show believed it to be real and went to that pizza shop with a gun in order to shoot, intending to shoot the owners of the shop. Fortunately, he was stopped before he did any damage. But there are others who pick up on these dissemination of false rumors about this group, that group, and then they take to violence. And so certainly the people who propagate this false news, fake news, conspiracy theory, alternative facts over the internet to inflame people's prejudice and hatred will be creating unwholesome karma.
Bhante, my interpretation is it's not the media, it's the content what's being propagated. In a sense, Buddha does put up a show also. Out of my memory, he used his supernatural power to show aging is so fast. It is a show. But the content is reality.
Yeah, of course. About the sutta that we did today, any sort of thoughts about that? Doesn't it seem somewhat quite different from the flavor that we usually get from the Pali Suttas?
Yes.
The Buddha sending out a radiance covering so many world systems and then speaking the Dhamma, conveying his voice to different world systems. Usually we see the Buddha as a human being, of course, enlightened human being. With, of course, supernormal powers, he can use them when he wants, but what we see in this sutta is something that goes far beyond what we see in other suttas. It's all, as I said in the class, it's almost starting to get the flavor of the Lotus Sutra here.
Yeah, is there any place in like the Pali, elsewhere in the Pali Canon, where like our Buddha travels with another monk to one of the other worlds?
Actually, there is a sutta in the Iddhipada Samyutta. Yes, in the Iddhipada Samyutta, which speaks about how, the Buddha explains how he travels with his physical body to the Brahma world. So, I think he says he enters into the Samadhi. Let me see if I can find that sutta. So it's not the case that just in a kind of meditative vision he travels to the other worlds. Maybe it's this one. Yeah, it's this one. Okay, again, it's with Venerable Ananda. Venerable Ananda.
Yeah, expand, enlarge.
Oh, I see. Okay, so Venerable Ananda comes to the Buddha and says, okay, does the Blessed One recollect, or is he aware of being able to approach the Brahma world with a manomaya kaya? This is a mind-created body, which is created by iti, by supernormal power. And then the Buddha says, I recollect, Ananda, having approached the Brahma world with a mind-made body, created through supernormal power. Okay, so that is traveling to the Brahma world in the mind-made body. But then Ananda asks, does the Blessed One recollect traveling to the Brahma world by supernormal power with this chatu mahabhuti kena kayena? That is, with this body made of the 4 primary elements. In other words, with this physical body. And then the Buddha says, yes, I recollect traveling to the Brahma world with this body made of the 4 elements.
Bhante. But my question was, in the story, in the previous story, in the Anguttara Nikaya.
Wait, maybe let's just see. First, let's finish this. Okay, then the Buddha explains how he does this. Okay, so he says, on the occasion when the Tathagata sort of focuses or sinks this body into the mind, or let's say he draws the body into the mind, and then he draws the mind into the body, and so he applies the perception, a blissful perception, a light perception to this body. And then on that occasion, the Tathagata's body becomes lighter, more malleable, more wieldy, more radiant. Then he uses the simile of an iron ball that's been heated all day, becomes lighter, more malleable, more wieldy, more radiant. And so that the Buddha's body becomes lighter, more radiant. And so then, when his body becomes lighter and more radiant and so on, then, without any trouble, the Tathagata's body rises up from the earth into space, and then he wields the many types of supernormal power. Having been one, he becomes many, and so on. And he exercises mastery as far as the Brahma world. Yeah, so now going on.
No, it's just you were pointing out how different. Actually, no, because it was on this.
Yeah.
The example that they give from the previous Buddha.
Yeah.
That he traveled to a heavenly world with a companion.
Yeah.
I don't know if those kind of stories appear elsewhere. Like, because I know that when they go to the heavenly world, like the Buddha or Mahamoggallana, they usually go by themselves.
Yeah.
But like going with companions.
Yeah, I remember there's a sutta in It's in the Anguttara Nikaya. I don't remember quite which Sangyutta, maybe the Book of Sixes. The Buddha goes up to a heavenly world. I don't remember which one. Then he doesn't go with anybody else. But then Mahakassapa looks around and wonders, where is the Buddha? Then Mahakassapa goes to that world. Then Moggallana looks around, where is the Buddha? Moggallana goes to that, I think it's a Brahma world. Then Anuruddha looks around, where is the Buddha? Ah, he's in that Brahma world. Anuruddha goes there. And then another monk looks around, where is the Buddha? And he goes to that Brahma world.
The story with, what is it, the story of what is the Buddha's half-brother Nanda?
Nanda also with Nanda, yeah. Buddha takes Nanda to the...
Is that's commentarial story, or is that like...
No, that is in the Udana.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He takes Nanda to one of the lower heavenly worlds. Okay, maybe if there's one more question, then we'll take it, and then we'll have to wrap up for the day.
Bhante, if you could...
Yes, sir.
If you could give the different, like kalpa, yuga, all those different terms we have it. But
wait, I'm not catching the sound.
Okay. I was just wondering if you could give us some details regarding the kalpa, yuga, the different terms we have, but what does it exactly means, and like there are certain kalpas that is that goes by, like gets destroyed by earth, wind, water. I mean by fire, water, and wind. We have heard. So if you could give her details about the maybe a simile or something, kind of explain it in a better way that we can understand.
I didn't quite catch the question. The kalpas.
Yeah, kapas.
The kalpas.
Yes.
When the kalpa is a period of time.
Yes, that is correct.
Well, the kalpa, it's the period of time used to account for the time between the arising and the dissolution of a world system. So it's said that the world system goes through different stages of development. So there's the arising, then there's the gradual development of the world system, then there's the gradual decay or decline of a world system, then there's the destruction of the world system. So those are the four stages in the evolution of a world system. And then the time in which all of this takes place is called a kalpa, or in Pali, the kappa.
So those kappas, when Buddha says, it means the whole world system, not just the earth, but the sensual planes. Because I believe in Aganna Sutta that he mentions that beings would be reborn in other realms when such things happen.
You mean when the world is destroyed?
Yes.
Yeah, then the beings will have to be reborn in other planes of existence. When this particular when this world system is destroyed, it's supposed to be destroyed up to including some of the heavenly worlds. And so all the beings in all of these realms can no longer inhabit those realms. So they have to be reborn in some other planes of existence.
Yeah, my question was regarding today's session where we had three types of thousandfold world systems. So does it include the first thousandfold, or the second thousandfold, or the third thousandfold world system?
You mean the destruction of the world system? I assume it applies only to the minor world system, but I'm not sure really.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, it's something that I haven't really looked into in detail. Okay, then we'll end for the day. And so we'll end with 3 half bows to the Buddha.